See, when I'm late paying my income tax, I get a very nice little letter and the phone call and so on, and it's all okay. But I get the impression that if I don't pay it, guys come around in blue and they take me away into a... So it's illegal. You have to pay income tax, surely.
Well, that's the impression they want you to get. It's called brainwashing.
It's a law. I mean, it's a law. Surely you're obliged to pay income tax.
Have you ever read the law?
No.
Section 150 that says you're supposed to file a return of income?
No, I saw the movie, but I haven't read the book. You're telling me you don't have to pay income tax?
I'll defer that to Bruce, my partner, because his specialty is actually taking the Income Tax Act apart, reading it. Very, very few people actually read the Income Tax Act, including accountants, including agents. We've had Revenue Canada agents on stands, 22 years with the Revenue Canada. They haven't read the income tax. Not only that, they don't even have a copy, true and certified, of the Income Tax Act in their 12-story building downtown.
When you earn money and you give lectures and so on.
We do, yes, we do. We're out here this weekend giving lectures.
How else do you make money? Do you write books? Do you write articles?
2 years. For 2 years, this is the way Bruce and I make a living. And we have training products. We have educational material. We have videos. We have audios. We have
How much
documents.
do you make a year? How much money do you make a year? Or won't you tell me?
How much do I make a year, Bruce?
You should know how much money you make a year. You don't have to ask him.
Dollars or pesos? No, that's another issue.
You're not going to tell us?
Well, you know, there's a difference between income and compensation. I don't have no income, but I have compensation. I get compensated for my tools, time, and labor.
How much are you compensated a year?
I could have probably bought that tie.
That was $80, actually. It's the best
tie
I have.
I don't think I'd spend that much, Michael.
You won't tell me?
No, I won't. No. I don't think so.
The assumption is that you earn enough money that you should be paying tax on it, and that most people in Canada will be paying tax on that sort of money.
Of course, yes. I don't deny that.
Do you enjoy the benefits of a taxed society, welfare state, socialized medicine,
some
police,
I do,
roads?
not as much as many people, but some I do, you know, and this is a standard response, and it's an intelligent response. Am I taking benefit from what other people are paying in taxes? And, you know, I am, because these things have been paid for probably 20 times over. When you understand how the system is set up for you to fail, be sick and stupid and broke, you realize that these have been paid for. I paid for them a long time ago. It's because of the way the banking's set up with non-government issued money, central bank issued money, and the way we're caught into this tax and to the deficit. You think they go to fix the roads? Hey, look around you.
I'm going to enjoy this. Use the phrase stupid.
Well, I think that we've all signed up in some way for the sick and stupid program.
So the only people who are taking advantage of our welfare society are the sick and the stupid. Is that what you're saying?
No. No, we're in a system whereby we're not being educated about the real truth of what's going on in our world. We're sending our children to school. They're not being educated about the real truth of what's going on. Bruce and I take it upon ourselves to educate people about the secrets, what's actually going on in our system. If you asked your viewers, how many people think they're being lied to by the government? I bet you get about a 95% hands up.
I bet you would.
How many people think they're being lied to by the media, with the exception of the Michael Coren show? Another 95%. What kind of a country is this when we probably have the most beautiful, the most desirable country in the world? Yeah. And we don't trust our leaders. It's like being in a family and having your father and mother be.
At this point, if I said how many people trust Byrun Fox, you might get 95% who say, no, I don't.
They shouldn't trust me. I don't make decisions for anybody. I just educate.
Let's get down to the fundamental. I'm really quite incredulous here. You don't pay any income tax. I assume officials have contacted you and said you have to pay.
I have, well, they've asked me in the past. You know, at times I've just said take a hike, etc. We've gotten a little more elegant since then. I have 2 charges of failure to file. I'm in court. But I'm doing some very unusual maneuvers in court, and eventually the agents who charge me will have to pay. I've turned it around by accepting for value, which is a very exotic legal maneuver, accepted charging documents for value, turning criminal into civil, and the agents pay. We reversed it on them. It's been done successfully in the States, and they've taught us how to do this. It's fantastic technology. You have to be prepared for this possibility, Michael.
You surely have to be prepared for them eventually to be able to take your home away. Do you have a family?
Well, you don't own a home in Canada anyways. It's an impossibility. Anybody says they own a home in Canada, you tell them to stop paying their taxes for 2 years and see who owns it. There's no ownership. It's held by right of the Queen in Canada, Yeah,
but you're being pedantic here. You own a home in that you can sell that home for money, and if you wanted to, you could take that money out of the country.
You own the home under a kind of lease, on a type of lease.
Well, if I have no, I've got a lot to pay in my mortgage, but when I own that home, when I paid the mortgage off, if I then sell that home, I can take that cash, and if I want to move to another country, I can go, and the money goes with me. No one's going to take it away from me. I mean, I'm sure that you're arguing about punctilios here. The fact is, people pay income tax because it goes to provide some things that aren't necessary, but for example, the health system. You're telling me...
That's not correct.
So the health system isn't financed by tax?
No, you're saying that people are paying income tax because it goes to... People pay income tax because they're afraid of the collector.
They don't see it as a duty?
They see it as fear. The working man out there, if they had the option, if it wasn't for the fear of the collector, he would not be paying that income tax. He'd rather have it in his pocket and spend it back into the system. He'd go out and buy another stereo for his house, buy a new couch, buy a new car, go on a holiday. He would spend that money back into circulation. But he's paying tax because he's in fear. And just like yourself, he hasn't read the law. He's doing it because his neighbor's doing it. He's filing because his neighbor's filing. He's filing thinking he's complying with the law because they're not knocking on his door. And he's doing it purely out of fear. He hasn't read the law. How does he know he's complying? How do you know you're complying? Because your neighbors are doing the same, Michael?
No, I don't really know my neighbors that well. I suppose because I believe, I believe in a social contract, and I have a certain trust for state power, and I know enough about how government works, know enough politicians to know that although tax dollars are frequently wasted, the bulk of what is paid is going, for example, to a health service, to an education policy that I might not agree with, but we have, for example, and there's a lot more to talk about here, but we have a health service, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's good or bad. I personally think it's a wonderful thing and more money should go into it, but do you think we could have a socialized health service in a week if nobody paid any more income tax?
Well, let me ask you this.
You won't answer the question.
Oh, I will answer it in a simple matter. How much of income tax that you pay, what percentage comes back in a service? $1 per every $8. Where does the other 7 go? The point is, we have a health system which you think is fantastic that's operating on $1 of the $8. Where's the other 7 going?
Didn't say it was fantastic. I said the idea of socialized medicine is a wonderful one, and I think more money should be put into it. But what you've just said to me is you simply think taxation is administered inefficiently. You haven't given me an argument for not paying tax.
Well, okay, well, simply the argument, I'll tell you right off the top, in my process in dealing with Revenue Canada, I don't believe in being a belligerent. I don't believe in not paying or not providing tax returns simply for no good reason, because I can or I'm a belligerent. I want to make a statement. No, I support my actions with reason. I'm not walking through this process without reason. I teach people how to ask Revenue Canada questions. I show them the law. I crack it open and say, here's the section. Now let's have a read at it and say have a look and see what it says. Let's understand this law. Let's read and define every single word so you're intimate and you understand the language that's speaking to you.
Let me stop you there. Lines are open for you. Surprise, I am. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. We'll hear a lot more from these people when we come back on Michael Coren Live from CTS. Don't go away. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CTS. Tonight you're going to hear a lot about income tax, not the normal stuff you see on TV that's really dry and dull. And if you divide the percentage point by the date of your birth and that, nothing like that. Some quite radical stuff. 2 people here who don't pay any income tax and apparently get away with it. I am not condoning that. I have enormous problems with that and I want to emphasize neither the show nor the station are condoning this. Later on we'll hear from people who have a different view. They're also radical. They believe in flat taxes, less taxes, different approaches. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. Just to reiterate, for 20 years, can't be 20 years for you.
No, that's indeed 8 years.
8 years for you, 20 years for you. You haven't paid any income tax. You haven't been imprisoned.
Never in my life, never.
You've been charged, though.
Never.
He has not.
You haven't.
I have two failure to file charges, which are, at the most, are $1,000 fine, but I will beat them, for sure, guaranteed. And I'll come back on your show and I'll show you how I beat them.
Aren't you terrified that one day they're going to come to you and say, no, you now owe us $200,000 and your life's going to be in ruins after that?
Listen to what you're saying, Michael.
Not at all.
You're saying live in fear of these people. We have no fear, and we've trained probably 25,000 people in 2 years to drop the fear and deal with this. And it's we've had people with tears in their eyes thanking us. They came in on a Saturday to our seminar, had to go to Revenue Canada on a Monday, and were scared witless until they learned what we had to do.
I don't like paying income tax. I hate it. And the end of this month, end of April, I'll go to see my accountant. She's terrific, and we'll go through everything. And I have a lot of money I have to pay, and I don't enjoy it. And I'm not such a great person. I feel, oh, you know, I'm doing what I have to do. But I do believe that there's a certain contract the individual has with the state, with government, and with fellow citizens, and I want the roads to work, I want the police to be there, I want the hospitals to run properly, I want the schools to be there. Where does the money come from? If you don't pay the tax, where does the money come from?
Really what we ought to be discussing here is that we're kind of getting off topic. We're getting into the politics of the game, where the money's going to come from. Gas tax for the roads, by the way, health tax or school taxes from the property tax that you pay. And then don't forget the GST and the PST.
You believe in property taxes then?
They're in place, and I just can only deal with but one. I'm one man.
But do you believe in property taxes?
Well, if you're going to rent the property from the state, you'd better pay the man his rent, and that's the property tax. Simple as that.
I find there seems to be a logical problem there. Property tax is another form of taxation. If you're
is.
not paying income tax, and property tax doesn't pay for the health service.
Well, the income tax, I find, is the most oppressive one. And it's the one that affects every single Canadian out there. Certainly. And it's the one that I think it should be. It's the most oppressive, and thus it's the one that I've personally chosen to direct my energies toward. And again, I'm simply looking at the law, Michael. I'll read the law, and if, by the letter of the law, I have to file, I will do so. If they can provide me a copy of the law in the fact that states that I must file, I will do so. I advocate this. I don't tell people don't file. I say pay tax if you're not smart enough to not. Get out there and learn it. You know, when's the due date for taxes? When's the due date? I'm going to have some fun with you. When's the due date? Take a pick.
You may.
Pull an air.
Few people have fun with me.
Let's have some fun.
I will file by the end of April, but I'll be lucky if I've paid my tax by the end of the year.
Well, the funny thing about the Income Tax Act, it states that the due date is on or before the following April 30th. When is the following April 30th exactly?
I don't know.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Isn't that the answer you want?
Well, that's the funny thing about it. This is the ambiguity in the law. It's crazy.
There may be, look, the law is the law. We've got a High Court judge on the show tomorrow. I think there's a higher law. Certainly, I know there's a higher law than just the law of the land. But there may be many laws. I mean, I may be able to go out and knock somebody down in a car and kill them and get away with it through a clever lawyer. It doesn't mean I've done the right thing.
So you're saying not paying taxes is immoral?
Yeah.
So it's a moral issue?
Absolutely.
It's not about law then? So we should be here talking about ethics and moral, not about law.
We always are, because you can't subtract morality from law and politics. All the law is an extension of a moral code. Now, our legal system may have gone wrong, but the idea that some people who have a lot of money pay some of that money to help those who are less fortunate, I think most Canadians would say, I agree with that. They might not want to pay so much tax.
I'll tell you what most Canadians also tell you, because I've been in front of about 25,000 of them, and I've polled them and asked them, and I've asked my audience, am I out of my mind doing what I'm doing? What do my peers think of my actions? Because I'm looking for a reaction soundboards. Most Canadians find it amazing to find out when they're in court, they're being prosecuted or they're being charged to pay fines under copyright law, unabbreviated, private publishers, consolidated, unofficial, revised versions of law. That's what these lawyers are going to be bringing into court. You ask your guests next if they have any law in their office that's not copyright. It's all copyright. I had a witness on the stand, a Revenue Canada agent, 20 years, since 1979, last November 15th on the stand, and I asked her, have you ever laid your eyes on an authentic copy of the Income Tax Act as certified by the clerks of the Parliament? The answer was no. No. Well, how do you know that law that you're administering is true and correct to the authentic words? You have no clue. You're making a guess, a presumption, and you're charging me under that? No way.
So aren't you just waiting for the day that a particularly clever tax officer and a particularly good prosecuting lawyer send you to prison?
A particularly good prosecutor. Understand that when I deal with Revenue Canada, and that's what I advocate, we have practitioners who ask them questions.
What do you mean practitioners?
People who are come to the seminar and say, we like what you're doing, we're going to practice your techniques, and we call it a practitioner. And when a practitioner, what they're doing, Michael, is they're building a file about themselves with Revenue Canada. And their file will be about 5 inches thick, and it'll be full of questions to Revenue Canada of which they've gotten 0 answers back, or their favorite answer, no statutory or legal requirement to reply. And then they end up in court. They're not in court saying, I didn't pay on it because I didn't have to, I'm a belligerent. I ask numerous questions in order that I may have a better understanding of the matters, and those who administer and enforce have refused to answer my questions. I'm left here with unanswered questions to complicate a scenario. What am I to do?
It seems to me, and I'm surprised that you have, but it seems to me that you've got away with something. Let me finish. I know you're not going to like that, but it seems to me you and the people you teach get away with something. And I certainly didn't think you could. I thought you'd be in a great deal of trouble, and maybe one day you will. But are you proud of getting away with something?
Well, what do you think the politicians are getting away with?
stuff the politicians. I have no time for them. But if I go into a store, you know what, and I see that, and I put it in my pocket, and I get away, and I've got away with it. It doesn't mean I've done the right thing, does it?
It's a non sequitur. It's not a valid metaphor.
Why is it non sequitur?
Because we're not taking something from somebody.
It's not relevant to what we're saying. Well, if it's directly relevant to what we're saying.
Implies mens rea. Getting away implies guilty intent and guilty conscience.
Not guilty conscience. You can be free of guilty conscience and still do something wrong.
Well, I'm not psycho. I can tell you right now that I do not feel guilty because I read the law and it doesn't tell me to do what you think it does.
So, if the law tomorrow was changed and said you had to pay income tax, you would pay it?
Bring me the law in the fact.
Would you pay it?
Yes.
I don't believe you.
That's
I
your
don't
opinion.
believe you.
You're entitled to that opinion.
I'll shake your hand any time.
If you can
you are only not paying the tax because the law isn't good enough? Come on, you're not paying income tax because you think it's immoral and you can get away with it, so you are.
Hey, but if I can, I will, and certainly you will too. If I can show you enough holes in that act that you could drive a Mack truck through, you tell me you won't take advantage of it. You tell me that. You tell your viewers, Michael, that you won't take advantage of every tax deduction.
I do take advantage.
That's immoral. Pay the most you can.
No, that will be quick. Sorry, that will be absurd. No one's saying pay the most you can. I have expenses that are valid, and I will say I have these expenses. I give money to charities. I don't not give the receipts to my accountant. Actually, I forgot last year, but this year I'll certainly give them. But I think there's a baseline when someone says this is ethical and this is not. If I see someone if I see someone who morality is not about percentages. If someone needs to have bypass surgery and I say, well, it's fair enough, but I don't want to pay the tax, so you can't have it. I couldn't sleep at night. Could you?
You think if you don't pay your taxes, he's going to be denied his bypass?
I think that if enough people do what you're doing, the health service, as an example, will collapse in this country.
If enough people do what we're doing, the government will stand up and pay attention to what the people of this country have to say to them. They're not happy with what's going on, and dishing out more money is not going to fix the problem. We need to gut the system and kickstart it. Push the reset button.
416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. What do you think? We'll get back to you as soon as we do come back on this show. Michael Coren live on CDS. Don't go away. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live. If you've been following this conversation, it's quite extraordinary. We have two men here who don't pay income tax. Actually, the RCMP were waiting outside the door. No, they weren't. This amazes me. I don't approve. I do honestly believe there's a social contract in society and we have an obligation to pay income tax. I think we're overtaxed. I think we all agree on that. But a certain level of taxation, redistribution of wealth, I do support. The lines are open for you. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. We're getting straight to you. On my left, Byrun Fox, Corporation Soul, a D-tax group. And on my right, Bruce Stella. These aren't your real names, right?
Correct.
No, not our real names. Not our given Christian appellations. We are Corporation's Soul.
Right.
Similar.
Why have you changed your names?
Well...
See, people who change their names are people running from the law, terrorists,
anybody who wants to know my real name can have it. But there is some people in the country that legally don't pay tax. Yeah. The Governor General is one. Now, we have equal protection under the law. Why is it she doesn't pay taxes? 25 years with the CBC mean you don't pay tax? I want to know. The secret is... She
probably does, actually.
Yes, it does.
Well, you've taken enough tax dollars, so you should pay some back.
The secret is that they are Corporation Soul. We figured
what does that mean, Corporation Soul?
It's a one-person church. It's a common law entity, one-person church, beholding only to Christ and God.
So now you're fighting as a Christian?
I didn't say that.
No, you didn't say that. I get the very strong impression that religion has nothing to do with it. You're taking advantage of a loophole.
We can't get him off this loophole thing, can we, Bruce?
It's pretty obvious. So Corporation Soul is a technical term, a legal term to describe someone who registers as a church?
You don't register. It's a common law contract with your Creator. The Pope started it in 1493. We modeled it after him. And, well, ask the Governor General. Ask your lawyer friends what a Corporation Soul was when they come on.
How does the Pope come into this in 1493? Who was the Pope in 1493?
I can't pronounce his name. What you have is you have a situation where the Pope wanted to be able to have assets and hold them for the church through time as various popes would come in and out of office, with no chance in the world that somebody come up and say, I'm your third cousin twice removed and that belongs to me. So he created a Corporation Soul. He couldn't create a corporation in the aggregate, which would be the three of us. That would be aggregate. he created a corporation in the soul. So when he died, the assets remained in the corporation's soul, and another pope came in. And the Queen did it, and then she sent out all her governor generals and lieutenant governors.
The Queen pays tax now, isn't she?
Oh, minuscule for the plebeians.
What are your real names?
Phil Naudi.
Phil Naudi.
Correct.
And?
I'm adopted, so I'm not sure. But I was given Kenneth Robert McMorty after I was adopted.
Okay. And you chose Byrun Fox and you chose Bruce Stella.
That sounds sexier, doesn't it?
Oh, please.
You're asking the wrong person here. I've got 4 kids. All right, 416-2030-302-905-332-3131. Let's go to Chris on line 2. Hi, Chris.
Hello there.
Hi.
Oh, nice tie there, Mike.
It is rather, isn't it? Yeah.
Say, my question here is, you know, you'd go to your local library, and you go take a look at the B&A Act, for instance, and you go through one section here, and it says direct taxation is supposed to be a responsibility of a provincial government, not a centralized government. Do you know anything about along the lines of that, how things have changed over the years?
I bet they do.
Well, certainly, I know when I started off in this game of tax battling and de-taxing, that was the very first argument that dropped on my lap, was Section 91, Section 92 argument from the B&A Act, and I'm certain that your guest, Paul there, will be able to expand on that quite well. He has quite a lot of information on that on his website, and I think he'd probably be the better fellow to go into depth on that argument. So best leave it to, it's not my, I know the argument, but it's not my field, so let's best leave it to the person who better answer that at a later time.
Okay, thanks for the call. Let's go to Chris on line 2. Hi, Chris. Oh, we lost Chris.
No.
Oh,
no,
you still there, Chris?
This is John, actually. Chris was your last caller.
Oh, I'm sorry about it. It's the tie. I get confused. It's cutting off blood supply.
But the tie's pulling too tight. I have a comment and a question, and I'll be brief. The comment is simply, I agree with Michael Coren in that a lot of the taxes do go to some of, not just social programs like our Medicare or our education. It goes to our roads, and it goes to our infrastructure, and it goes to our projects, and it goes to a lot of things that we take advantage of and that we forget that we use. So that's part of my comment. My question is, I'm originally from BC. I'm new to Ontario, and I followed some of your battles there, and they've been well documented. One of the things that did come up, and I don't disagree with everything, but one of the things that did come up was some militant action by either some detaxers or some factions of detaxers. I want to make sure that detaxation doesn't include militancy, or does it?
He's got a very fair concern.
Yeah, because we think of militias and so on.
Exactly. And let me tell you, right now, I'm a family man. I have 2 children. I've been married for 16 years. I do not advocate violence. We never have at any of our seminars. It's often we get tarred with the same brush. I've been called a rebel with a heart. We are just simply not at all connected to anything to do with violence, militant, period, full stop.
Aren't you encouraging that sort of thing, though?
No, not at all. I'm asking people to learn.
Listen, talk about violence. You talked about money and where it goes to, roads, etc. The money went to send troops over to Kosovo, Sarajevo, Bosnia. Little children were blown up by this money that you want to spend on taxes. I don't advocate that whatsoever. I've never blown up anybody, Michael.
I really object to what you've said there, because look, I think the Gulf War was an incredibly immoral thing. I believe we probably did have to intervene in the Balkans. What you're saying is, though, you're not saying, and this argument's a very weak one on your part, you're saying it's not the tax I object to, it's how we spend the tax. So, if we can guarantee the tax is spent properly, would you then support it?
I'm just countering the way he was arguing. He says it goes to roads, I say fine, it goes to kill children too.
What about the police? Do they prevent people being hurt?
Oh, I've known police that, of course they do, sure, they do.
Who pays them?
Well, you probably paid out of your civic taxes, of your house taxes.
Income tax as well. The police get money from various levels of government.
That's fine.
What about the armed forces to protect us?
Protect us from what, Michael?
If there was a war tomorrow.
Michael,
what about the armed forces to rescue people who are drowning? What about the armed forces to rescue people who need help in Northern Ontario and are isolated? Should we not? Who pays them?
I can concoct 5,000 reasons why we should continue to pay into the system. I think we've established that quite clearly. My simple position is this. I've read the law, and it doesn't tell me that I have to file And when I look at the return that I'm to file, I can prove that that's not a prescribed or authorized form. Even if you file, you haven't complied.
But you're coming back to you can get away with it.
It's not getting away. I'm going to the letter of the law, the very law that they tell you can deduct and can't deduct, the very law that they take away and give you benefits.
I'll ask the question, I asked it earlier, and I'll ask it again.
Okay.
Then, to follow the logic of your argument, if tonight a law is passed that is foolproof, is watertight, will you then tomorrow pay all the tax that you owe?
Yes.
I've offered.
We've asked for the law in the fact.
So all you're trying to do really is improve the law. You just want to improve the law.
Listen to this. Listen to this. I've taught people how to. I have an offer that I give people to seminars. I say, here you go. Send it to Revenue Canada. They offer to file and they offer to pay upon receipt of the authentic copy of the Income Tax Act, the statute at large, bound as one, authentic in the fact. You provide it, and don't send me to the library to have a look at a consolidated, revised, abbreviated, unofficial
copyright law. So if the law is changed tonight, you would pay all the tax you owe.
We have to obey
From
the
this
law
point
of the country,
forward,
Michael.
absolutely.
If
Don't
it's the
make
law
talk
of the
about
country,
retroactive law, though, please.
Do you buy that?
Absolutely.
I've got a bridge to sell you as well. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. We'll get to Harry and Kim and Donald and all the rest of you when we come back on Michael Coren Live. It's tax-free as well. Welcome back, Michael Coren Live. Now, a little later on, we're going to have three people here who are all critics of the tax system. They're flat taxes and lower taxes, all this sort of thing. Different type of conversation. The two guys we have now, though, don't pay tax. They don't pay income tax. They haven't, one for 20 years, one for 8 years. They're still here. They use different names. It's all rather interesting, I think is the word. Maybe that's a euphemism. Let me reintroduce. On my left is Byrun Fox, Corporation Seoul, Ontario D-Tax Group, and Bruce Stella from the same. They're based in BC, but they're here now. By the way, for people who do want to go and hear you, a seminar, right?
Yep. Carlton Best Western, out near the airport. Carlton Best Western, Saturday and Sunday, 10 o'clock in the morning, go to 8 o'clock in the evening, both days, Saturday and Sunday, Carlton Best Western.
So if you want to pick it, you know where to go. Harry on line 3. Hello, Harry.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is that I certainly be interested in finding out how to keep a little bit more of my hard-earned cash in my pockets. And you continually refer to the healthcare system and how it would suffer. My personal feeling, having experienced both sides of the borders, is that if we had a little less taxes to pay and had a little more money in our pocket, we could afford a little better, what I consider to be better private healthcare system. Until you get away from this country for a little while, you don't really understand how socialistic it is. And I'm for free enterprise. I'm not for a socialistic plan or a country myself, so I prefer to have the money in my pocket to be able to afford a good private health care system.
It's a different show and a different argument, and we have done it before. I would just very briefly say, yeah, if you're rich, particularly if you're rich and white in the USA, it's great. You know, you can really buy what you want. But even then, say AIDS comes into the family, or cancer, or long-term heart surgery, you'll find you're not going to get reinsured, and you could be in deep trouble. Then go to the middle classes, and then go to the people at the very bottom. I don't want that system. Our one is certainly dented beyond belief, but I think it's worth saving. But thanks for the call, Harry. Let's go to Kim on line 4. Hi, Kim.
Hi. This business they were mentioning earlier about owning a home in Canada, to really look at it, and I've read some of the acts. I'm into that kind of stuff. You don't own a home in Canada technically. You don't. The government can, when they free will, whether you don't pay your property tax or your income tax, can take that house from you whenever they feel like it.
Yeah, but you're nodding, but you've told me they can't do anything. Now we're hearing they can take your house away, and you're saying yes?
Absolutely. The government has absolute power over you. You've got to understand exactly where you're standing, and people are out there working hard to maintain their houses. They're afraid of losing it. They don't realize that they're nothing but tenants to the very home that they have a registered title on. That's all they have.
But this is...
it's hard to accept. I concur.
Neurotic. I mean, that's what it is. No one's going to come and take your house away. It's the sort of thing you get on the internet, on those crazy stations from the States.
So
no one's going to come and take your house away.
Why did they set it up through the Transland system, which is based after the Trans, who used for, what was it?
Admiralty in
Exactly. I'm sorry, I'm lost for words. Registering ships of Admiralty. The whole system that we have, if they would just simply disclose to you that you're a tenant and you can pay the mortgage, which is really just another tax, is it not, in interest. I mean, come on.
Michael, I hear what you're defending here.
Do you have happy lives? I mean, does anything please you?
I'll have a blast.
Does anything, come on, Mike, does anything please you?
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah, family, home, doing what I'm supposed to do.
if you had been on the phones like we have in the last 2 years and received calls from guys that are adult men that are sometimes your age and older, crying because they're losing the farm. We had somebody who was a dyslexic accountant.
That's a different
they
issue.
hired.
That's a different issue.
No, it's
you
not.
know
It's Revenue Canada that's hurting you. It's our country. It's hurting our people.
Absolutely agree that Revenue Canada can be unfair, the tax system can be unfair, but you're saying there shouldn't be a tax system.
Why do you support it
I
if
do
it's
not
unfair?
support it as it stands. I believe in a
You do
tax
support
system.
it. You're paying your
And
taxes.
I
I
support
don't
clarity.
support
I'm paying my taxes.
I support honesty, clarity in the law,
So do I.
truth from people.
So do I. And
Give us
duty
some
and
of it.
obligation, and I believe we live in community, and we
Concur.
can't just say, if we can get
Concur.
away with it, fine.
Concur.
Listen,
I'm not getting
I'll
with
make
it.
you a bet there that you will never get a Revenue Canada agent on this program with us. We'll sit here, we'll debate Revenue Canada. You get them on this program, Michael. We'll come from Vancouver. We'll fly out here to debate.
Well,
with
hold you to that, but I've got a feeling you're right.
I'm
But then
absolutely
why
right.
should they come on with you?
If they got nothing to hide, why wouldn't they?
They're not obliged to come on any TV
I'm not
show.
obliged, neither are we.
Well, you're doing it because you want to get people to come to your seminar,
And they want to do, they get you to file.
which I should do. Let's take another call. Donald on line 8. Hi, Donald.
Oh, this is Arnold.
Arnold?
Yes.
Oh, why did you change your name? You're like these two.
I didn't. Welcome. Well, you said that paying taxes is the obligation, and also used the term moral issues. I have a question. If you could answer, if you could name one government initiative that has been implemented successfully in the last few years, because I haven't been able to come up with one.
You want me to answer that?
Well, if you could, because
Well, yeah, I certainly could. When you're talking about, if you mean initiatives that are totally new, I can't think of too much the government has done the last few years, but I keep going back to the basics we have that are fairly long-term, that if you look at what existed before the Second World War in terms of healthcare and medical care, it was insulting to humanity. We've changed that, and that's been tax finance. And you talk about moral issues. I'm sorry, I'm lucky. I have a certain ability. I can earn pretty good money writing columns and appearing on TV. I'm lucky. There's another guy who isn't so lucky, and he's working probably much harder than I am and earning maybe a third of what I am, and I don't think it's outrageous for me to pay a bit of taxation to maybe help him a bit. That's not a radical thing to say. It's human decency.
The reason he hasn't got a job is because of taxation, because there's not enough money out there for someone to employ him in the first place.
Either I didn't make myself clear or you're purposefully misinterpreting. I didn't say unemployed. I said working probably harder than me and earning a third of what I get.
Sure. The company can't afford to pay him. They're paying too much tax.
So if there are no taxes paid, everything is fine.
Well, imagine tax-free places like Bahamas, Bermuda, Caymans, Belize. There's tax-free places in the world. Sure, and they're wonderful.
But all of those places you've named, with the exception of Belize, which is, well, it was a British dependency, and it's not really, it's an artificial nation, but the other three are contrived places. These aren't nations with an industrial base and a population to take care of and inner cities. Look at any developed country, or even undeveloped country, of any size, and tell me where taxation isn't paid.
Well, nowhere in the world, because everybody's trapped into this. It's the worldwide trap for the servitude, to put you into servitude. You're going to your accountant. How many accountants would there be in the world if there wasn't any taxes? She's a parasite as well.
I'll tell her that when I see her.
Do for me. Invite her down to the seminar. We've had accountants go through our seminar.
She better ask her to make sure that the form she's asking to sign and file is indeed a prescribed and authorized form, because the law states you to file on prescribed form. You better make sure that's what you're filing, otherwise you're not complying. You don't want to be doing that now, do you?
You're committing fraud
Gentlemen,
if you don't do that.
Gentlemen, and I use the term advisedly. No, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it, my thanks.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll have three other people talking about taxation. They certainly want lower taxation. They maybe even want no taxation at all. I don't actually know. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. I'm Michael Coren, live in just a moment. Welcome back to you, Michael Coren Live. Those two gentlemen have left the building, I think, so if you want to go and grab them and, you know, just give it a try. Unbelievable. I really am incredulous. I did not know that you could not pay tax and get away with it. I don't approve of it. I made that quite clear, I think. Moving on from that, three people who also have very critical views about the tax system. Most of us do, in varying degrees. Let me introduce them. On my left is David Lesperance, a lawyer with a global relocation consultant. Oh, he is a global relocation consultant and a lawyer. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
He's been on the show before. Paul McKeever, a lawyer, member of the Ontario Freedom Party. Welcome back to you, sir.
Thank you.
And on my right is Michael Taube, a public affairs analyst. When I knew you, you were a journalist. Now you're a public affairs analyst.
Still am. I use both titles.
Yeah, exactly. That just means you're doing better in your career.
Well, let's hope.
What do you think about those guys?
Well, I think the arguments are not very good. The one fellow talked about not being able to touch an income tax act, not being able to touch a real income tax act and private publisher ones. And I can say these hands touched the Income Tax Act last Monday, and if he now will pay the tax, I will bring him down so he too can touch the Income Tax Act. It is available. I happen to touch it at the Great Library, which is at Osgoode Hall, and which is operated by the lawyers, so he couldn't walk in there. He could come in with me if he wants to pay my fee, or he could go to the University of Toronto Law Library and touch the Income Tax Act. Now,
hey, Junior, there's the Income Tax Act.
Well, the Income Tax Act, it's a bit misleading, because the Income Tax Act is really a collection of legislation. It's a collection of different bills, numerous bills, which deal with income tax. The government consolidates, they pull all that together every so often. That was last done in 1985. So you can go and touch it up to that point. Then if you want to touch any beyond that, you go to the individual bill, and there are many of them which have dealt with it since 1985.
You might not approve of what they were saying, but you're not a great fan of the tax system. Well, maybe you are a fan of the tax system. Global relocation consultant sounds to me as though you find tax exile places for people.
What I do is for people who have made, that's exactly right, who've made the decision that they don't feel that the system is fair for them anymore. And instead of trying to stay and get out of the income tax, Canada has said, well, our Prime Minister has said, if you don't like it, then you can leave. And these are people who are, quite frankly, taking the Prime Minister up on his offer.
So these are people who maybe earn $60,000, $70,000 a year, are they?
Oftentimes, $60,000 or $70,000 a year.
We're talking about the rich, the very rich, yeah?
Well, it's interesting, the rich and the rich not paying their share. The top 1% of taxpayers in this country provided 13% of the revenue. And you're right, that was $150,000 plus to be in the top 1%. The top 10% were $60,000 plus. They provided 40% of the revenue. So we're talking about wealthy people. We're also talking about young graduates from Sheridan's animation, people who are moving to the United States for lower taxes. There are also people who are making a decision, and I'm a lawyer who helps them move to different places.
Look, I earn decent money. I'm not rich, but I'm certainly in the higher, I suppose, the 10% level. There is no way I could even consider moving out of the country. I wouldn't want to move out of the country. Surely you're dealing with people who are millionaires or multimillionaires who simply don't want to pay the tax that they're paying at the moment in Canada.
No, not really. I do have the occasional client who's extremely wealthy. There are people, Michael, who usually have the radical idea that they made the money and they want to see how it's spent. I, at the beginning, very much thought these were people who were going to spend it on more toys and things like that, but actually quite charitable people, and they just feel that the decisions that they make in spending that money in their chosen areas that they want to, they just do that much better than the government does.
You don't have to answer these questions, because I realize it's private information, but what would be the average income of one of your clients?
Well, there would be really two types of clients. There would be the young clients, in which as somebody who's remaining as a Canadian taxpayer scares me the most when we see a large number of young people who, if they stayed, would be contributing for the next 30 years to the income tax base here, who are leaving. These would generally be college graduates, people coming out in their first year. They may be everything from MBAs to the animators that I talked about. So they may have starting salaries from
when I left university, I didn't have 2 pennies to rub, I had nothing. They have money, they have so much money they want to leave the country.
Well, they're making a decision that they're going to make a salary and that they're going to only give back part of that salary to the government by choosing a tax regime. So that may be for income tax purposes. They may decide that the marginal rates in the United States are lower, and that's where they want to go. There are other people who have made a large amount of money paid income tax on that, will pay capital gains tax on that, but are making a decision, I will pay on what I've made, take whatever is left, and that's it. I'm not going to pay to this country. Now, you brought up a question before about living in tax havens and infrastructure and things like that. Mm-hmm. These people are not adverse to paying taxes for public services. But when you have 1% paying such a huge amount, they long ago covered whatever public services they have, and everything beyond that is really going to be charity, and they just don't feel that the government directs the money where they think it's needed.
What are the countries, apart from you mentioned the US, what are the other countries, are they living there or are they putting their money there? I'm not absolutely sure how it works.
Well, actually, the Canadian rules are fairly clear. You have to move to another country, you have to centralize your mode of living, so that will mean getting rid of houses, bank accounts, everything here. You have to establish another residence somewhere else. Canada doesn't consider you to have left if you simply get on a boat and leave. And you must, in the future, not centralize your mode of living in Canada or spend more than 183 days, 6 months here in Canada. So these are people who are making a decision, and there's a big lifestyle cost to that. They're not particularly happy that they do that, but they're doing it. Where they're moving to really depends on personal lifestyle. The gentleman before mentioned the Bahamas and Bermuda and Cayman. Well, there is not income tax there, but there are very high duty rates. A car in the Bahamas, you will pay 110% duty rate to import that car. A Wall Street Journal is $8 because of the duty rate, so you simply pay it.
No, you can't get the Wall Street Journal from that. Gosh.
Go online. So some people do end up in those, what we would think of traditional tax havens. Other people go to what we would think of as high tax countries like the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Ireland, on a low tax basis. They do tax planning prior to going in, and they pay tax, but they've limited the amount of tax that they pay.
416-203-0302-905-332-3131. Lots more to hear on taxation and you on Michael Coren Live. Don't go away. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CDS, and I didn't know this, but apparently Oshawa is a tax haven. No, I'm just joking, it's not really. I'm staying here, whether you like it or not. Let me, well, we're talking about taxation. We're talking about paying tax, and only a fool would say, I want to pay more taxation. It's like those people who say, I want more of the CBC. You know, you think, what? What? People don't want to pay more tax. They want to pay less tax if possible, but I think a lot of people do realize that, you know, you pay a certain degree because you think others deserve some help, and that many of us have unfair advantages. I have little regard for a guy who's given $1 million and makes another $1 million. That's easy. I've got regard for a guy who has nothing and makes money. But I'd say a lot of people who are very wealthy began fairly wealthy, and that's not so difficult. 416-203-0302-905-332-3131. We heard about tax exile, about paying tax in other countries. Paul McKeever, he's a lawyer, also with the Ontario Freedom Party, a libertarian. That's fair enough, isn't it, to say a libertarian? Sure. Do you believe in any taxation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a proper role for taxation. I guess classically a libertarian would be of the opinion that the primary role, not necessarily the only role, but the primary role of government and taxation is to provide for a justice system, police, government, court system, to make sure that people and their property are not harmed. And there are other expenses, of course, like keeping care of public ways, such as highways and etc.
Nothing more than that?
Not a lot more than that, no. I guess the underlying philosophy in libertarianism is that people know best, and people know best what to do with their money and know how to do it in a most efficient way.
I think most people would argue that the common good is greater now than it was, say, in 1870. When there was very little taxation and no welfare state. They would argue that Bismarck, for example, who introduced the welfare state into Europe, the one we modeled our system on really, did that because the country was falling apart, because Prussia and Germany was falling apart, because there was such a gap between rich and poor. Surely some form of distribution of wealth, redistribution of wealth, some form of welfare state, even if it's limited, is worth having.
I certainly don't think you want to have people starving in the street, so I guess maybe I'm not a pure libertarian in that sense.
You're a softie, aren't you?
I'm a softie.
Yeah.
But, you know, other than taking care of those who are obviously have no income, have no way of sustaining themselves, perhaps the mentally ill and etc. You know, I think that a normally functioning adult has every responsibility to try to find work and to carry out that work if they do find employment.
Do you believe in equality of opportunity?
No. I believe that it's impossible to make equal opportunities. I believe that instead what you have is an equal application of the law. So that if there is, for example, an opportunity that's open to one person and to another, the law will not introduce some kind of distinction where one person gets a leg up as opposed to the other. In terms of opportunities, though, an astronaut will have opportunities that I'll never have because of his training, and no law is going to give me that opportunity. Likewise, I'll never have the opportunity to give birth to a child because I just don't have the equipment. Yeah. So I really don't believe that you can legislate. Yeah, I don't think you can legislate equal opportunity.
Let me rephrase the question then. Sure. Do you believe in creating a hereditary class system where the rich remain the rich and the poor remain the poor?
I don't want the poor to remain the poor, or else I'd remain poor. I think that certainly people may dispose of their wealth as they wish. I don't think that the government should be taking it away at the time they die, if that's what you're asking.
I was asking this. If, for example, you're born into a family where dad is a millionaire, now that's not being something, but where your father's a millionaire, and he may have worked very hard for that money, you're going to go to a school and to a university that's very good, and you're going to get a fine education, and you're going to be given the best, and you're mixed with the best, and the interest alone from your father's money will make you a very wealthy person. You've got to be pretty stupid to be poor at the end of that. If you're born into a family where there's very little money at all, the chances are you won't get out of that situation. The best you'll do is become maybe lower middle class. If you don't have a system of even gradual or slight redistribution of wealth, you will always have the rich being the rich, and there'll be a few poor people who get up the ladder and people say, oh, he was poor, but he's not so bad now, but generally nothing will change. We don't have equality. We never will have complete equality, but surely it's in our nature, the best side of our nature, to try and achieve something approaching equality.
I think the exact opposite, using the exact same elements you talked about. That redistribution of wealth is affecting the middle class, the lower middle class, the upper middle class, just as much as as it's helping those who are poorer. And if you want to have the person who has nothing have an opportunity or take advantage of his opportunities to become well off, to become wealthy, then certainly you don't want to cut his legs off before he even gets there. I mean, I'm an employment lawyer by trade. Most of the people that come to see me aren't very wealthy. They just lost their jobs. They're employed people. And their primary complaint whenever you talk about overtime is, why work overtime? If I work overtime, my tax rates will go up. I'll be working for peanuts. They understand that the current system of wealth redistribution through the tax system is hurting them. They can't get ahead.
I certainly agree it's deeply flawed. Briefly, what level of taxation are we talking about? What do you have, 10%, 5%, 1%?
I wouldn't be stuck to a particular percentage. I think whatever's necessary to make sure that justice is done in society.
Give me a rough idea.
20%, I guess.
20%?
Possibly.
My gosh, you're a communist almost, aren't you? Michael Taube, public affairs analyst, journalist. Again, I know, not a fan of the tax system as we have it. Nobody is, but how would you change it?
Well, I mean, for me, to go back to the initial point, I think there's a big difference between what we call detaxers and tax reformers. Yeah, sure. Detaxers are basically people who are trying to oppose the entire system by looking for basic loopholes. Tax reformers, such as myself, are looking for issues to bring down the tax levels. I mean, every conservative, libertarian, right-wing thinking person, or even left-wing thinking person, believes in a level of taxation. The way I'd like to do it, as I wrote about in the Wealthy Boomer, Volume 2, Issue 2, is to bring in a flat tax.
Volume 2, Issue 2. Oh.
And right and accurate. Is to bring in a flat tax, or what the Canadian Alliance is proposing right now, a 17% flat tax, or the 17% solution.
Why 17%?
17% was a number that was crunched by a group called WEFA, the World Econometrics...
Well,
whatever,
yeah.
WEFA, okay, who actually do a lot of work for the Liberals as well. 17% coupled with a provincial rate of about 12% will bring us down below the top federal provincial rate, will be about 29% overall. The argument has always been for most of us, how do we bring it down from, right now it's about the top federal provincial rate is about 48%, which is way too high. I mean, anybody could say that. How do we bring it down to actually equalize our society and at the same time bring off people from the lower income groups, of which the Canadian Alliance platform will have about 1.9 million people will be taken off permanently from the tax rolls? How do we bring them back up and us back down to sort of find an equal level of taxation for the entire country? And I think a flat tax is the best way to do it.
Many people would argue that the government in Ontario is quite similar to what any Canadian Alliance government would be. You have a government in this province that certainly has reduced tax to a limited degree, but I don't see poorer people coming off tax rolls. I don't see poorer people and the middle class saying, hey, this is great. I mean, generally, I see quite a lot of discontent.
Sure, but we don't have flatter tax rates in the province of Ontario, and that's the major problem. What we have are getting tax cuts. Tax cuts are completely different. The Liberal government in the last federal budget brought in tax cuts, but they also brought in increased levels of social spending. Couple the two things together, which any basic mathematician would say the two don't equal out and they cancel each other out, it can't work. A flat tax rate takes away, hopefully, although the Canadian Alliance plan is not perfect that way, we'll probably get into it, takes off a fair amount of personal exemptions and deductions that a lot of people abuse right now within the tax system and brings it to a nice level pace.
All right. Wow, look at those lines. 416-203-0302-905-332-3131. Dan and Joanne and Wally and Audrey and George and all the rest of you, we're going to get to you. Don't go away. I can see you on Michael Coren Live. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CDS. Well, I'll be going to my accountant. Hello, Rhonda. Are you watching? A little late one, a few weeks' time, actually, and I'll give her all the stuff, and this is what you have to pay, and I won't be able to pay it at first, and I'll send something off, and then I'll get this letter from Revenue Canada. They're always very courteous. You've got to pay at some point, and I'll pay it off gradually, and they say it's okay, fine, but Mr. Coren must inform you, if this check bounces, then there's no more consultation. We just come and take your children away or whatever they do. I don't like doing it, who does? But I do feel there is an obligation. I'm lucky, I earn fairly good money. Some people are struggling. You don't want complete equality, it's artificial, it'll never work. But I think there should be a certain limit. You know, the tall can be tall, but how tall? And nobody should be too short. It just doesn't work that way. I believe in something approaching equality. I don't believe that makes me an extremist. I think that makes me actually a fairly typical Canadian. It's up to you. 416-203-0302-905-332-3131. Let me reintroduce the panel. David Lesperance, a lawyer and a global relocation consultant. Where do you take your holidays, by the way?
Long Point, usually.
What a job. Paul McKeever was a lawyer and a member of the Ontario Freedom Party. You stood as a candidate, did you?
I did in the last Ontario election.
How many votes did you get?
337 big votes.
I shall not comment, it wouldn't be fair. Michael Taube is a public affairs analyst, which means he's a journalist who writes on various issues. And you. Dan on line 4. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how you doing, Mike?
Doing well, thanks.
Initially, I called for those other two guys that were on there, and I was just going to mention, I remember hearing a while back that income tax was initially introduced to aid in the war effort in one of them, and then it was kind of adopted. And I was just kind of wondering if that was true and how that went about, but since then you've got these other three gentlemen on there, and they're touching base on a whole bunch of stuff that's just, I mean, a lot of it makes sense.
I think I'm pretty sure, wasn't it the Napoleonic Wars when tax was introduced?
Pardon me? It was
the Napoleonic Wars, taxation was introduced?
In Greece.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It goes
Canada,
and Jean Chrétien was Prime Minister even then.
You knew that.
At the federal level, see, what happened was that the Constitution divided all sorts of legal powers. You can work on the criminal law, you can make laws with respect to the criminal law, you can make laws with respect to education and health. Okay, so the provinces got education and health, the federal government got criminal law, military law, sorry. They also divided the power to make certain kinds of taxes, and they said, provinces, you can impose a direct tax within the province for provincial purposes, and the federal tax, guys, the federal government, you can impose on anything else. And what happened was, you know, the war came along and the need was there, and none of the provinces really complained.
War, you mean?
Actually, the First World War. And in 1917, an emergency income tax was imposed by the federal government. And prior to that, no direct tax, an income tax is what's called a direct tax. No direct tax had ever been imposed by the federal government. But what happened was there was a crash in 1929. There was a change. There was a philosophical shift economically to intervention by a centralized authority within the countries. And we saw in the United States, Canada, and Britain more authoritarian or more interventionist style governments. And what happened was that the federal government essentially said, look, we want to continue imposing a tax. Now, they didn't, in my opinion. Don't go out to the court and make this argument, you will fail, okay? But this is on an academic level. I'd like to say that my opinion is that the federal government continues not to have the jurisdiction to impose an income tax or a GST. But they've done it for so long and they've gotten so far in debt that no court is ever going to tell anybody that that's okay.
That's right. Government very rarely limits its own powers. People go into government because they want to govern. Taxation is there to pay for a war. Hey, we can extend it. No one's going to stop us. Thus, there must be a word to describe that law. It's not Murphy's Law, but they carry on extending and extending. Let's take another call. Joanne online. I think there's 8. Hi, Joanne.
Hi. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Yes, I was actually wanting to speak when the other gentlemen were on there, but I agree with you that yes, we have to be taxed in a way to support our benefits and that. One comment I had to make is I've been working in the accounting field for about the past 15 years now, always for small businesses. And the high cost of getting an accounting firm to do your income tax return at the end of the year, which is unaudited. And in my experience, a lot of errors have been done. And another point is that Revenue Canada, in a lot of dealings with them, have been good. There's something called the Fairness Commission. Whenever you have a beef, and you have to persevere very hard. This is from personal experience, not only from business experience, and they are there to help you.
Yeah, I must admit, Joe, my experience has not been a bad one up to now. Hey, ask me in a couple of years, maybe I'll have a bad experience, but at this point, I can't say I've been treated unfairly. Let's take another call. Wally on line 7. Hi, Wally.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I was just listening to the previous comment about the 1917 legislation and the carrying on of the Income Tax Act. You know, what my studies started some 8-10 months ago on this particular issue. I am an accountant, and I've audited with Revenue Canada, and I can assure you that the 1970 piece of legislation had absolutely nothing to do with the cost of the war. What it had to do with was the fact that we'd already, in 1913, changed from debt-free currency to debt currency when the banks were given the power to start issuing money, and the national government had accumulated a $4 billion debt by the year 1917, and that was why we have an Income Tax Act, and that's where our taxes are going, is to service that national debt. We don't.
All right, so it's nothing to do with the war. Originally, income tax was brought in simply because the government couldn't manage things. True?
Well, taxes are imposed to raise revenue. As to how the money gets spent, who knows what the real motives were. The point is, the money was raised by an indirect or by a direct tax, that being the income tax, and there's some question in my mind as to whether or not they're really supposed to be doing that. But it's way too late in the game to be reversing the trend.
You still need a level of taxation to maintain a liberal democratic society. I mean, there's nothing to even question in that argument. There may be some problem, there may be some little misgrievings with how it's worded and how it became, you know, how it's sort of changed over the last few decades. But the fact is, you know, income tax is legal, income tax will always be paid, and we always will pay something of it. I don't know what the level will be. I'm hoping lower, but obviously there's going to be something.
Well, I would say...
Let me get a break this one. Sure. 416-203-0302 and 905-332-3131. How do you feel about paying the tax? I mean, do you resent it, or do you see it as a duty, as something that you don't like doing, but that you should do? You know, I don't like taking showers, but I do it because I feel I should. Michael Coren, live, CDS, back in a moment. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CDS. By the way, I should say that, give a plug for the Wealthy Boomer magazine, because both Paul McKeever and Michael Taube write for the Wealthy Boomer. Do you write for the Wealthy? You do too, of course you do, because that's where we saw it. In fact, you all write for the Wealthy Boomer. You don't have to hold it up.
And there's no conspiracy. We should point that out.
And I tell you what, actually I do sometimes as well. But nothing to do with taxation. My stuff is much better than that. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. We're talking about taxation. I mentioned these two guys, but I'll introduce the whole panel. David Lesperance, a lawyer, a global relocation consultant. Paul McKeever, Ontario Freedom Party. Michael Taube, a journalist. And you. George on line 1. Hi, George.
Hi.
Hi there.
I would just like to comment on, I think the Canadian income tax system was, I don't mind paying taxes if it's fair, but I think it's a non-productive system. A system where the harder you work, the more you pay. Don't really work. If there was a flat system and you knew you only had to pay like 20% or whatever, that's fine. You'd pay that. There'd be no problem. But for instance, if you want to work for someone and the guy said, I'll pay you $10 an hour, but if you work harder, I'll only pay you $9. I don't think it would work too well. And I think our tax system is totally non-productive.
I agree 100%. You know, it is an absolute crime, in my view, when you already have a system, even with a flat tax, you've got people who are making more money, paying more money. There's no problem with that. It's the wealthy are paying more than the relatively poor. Why then take the guy who's just trying to work a little harder, maybe put in a bit of overtime, pay off the house, put his kids through school? Why punish him for putting in the overtime by saying, well, okay, you know how you were working for 20 bucks an hour or 15 bucks an hour? Now, for that overtime, you're going to be working for the equivalent of maybe 17 or 15.
That's right.
It's criminal. I've got to say, there is something quite appealing about this flat tax, because if someone earns $1 million a year and so they pay, say, $200,000 in income tax, still a lot of money.
Right.
You may have convinced me on this one. You may. I don't know. It's worth considering. It's worth considering. Yeah. Will it happen, though? I mean, surely the rich will find ways to get out of paying even that amount.
Well,
they'll have the good accountants and so on.
One of the points is you've got a very small percentage of the population. Remember, we talked about the 1% paying 13%, and the top 10% paying 40% of the tax. These are the exact same people who have the skills, the knowledge, and the adventuresome or entrepreneurial spirit to actually pick up and move to another country. What happens when a significant number of them start going? You have an extraordinary effect on government revenue. And if you maintain the level of spending when your revenue is dropping, something's got to give. I mean, it is already giving. We're seeing a huge drop in our national currency, which is a form of taxation. When that dollar drops against other world currencies, that's a form of taxation. We're seeing an increase in value-added taxes like the GST and other types of taxes and commodities taxes. I mean, it's one of the things as I'm doing these clients, and yes, I get paid a fee that puts food in my mouth.
I'm sure very good food as well.
But the thing that I keep seeing as I watch each one of them go is that's one less 1%er or 10%er who's going to be throwing in an extraordinary amount to the...
Atlas is shrugging.
Yes.
The producers are saying, well, I'll only produce if you're going to... I mean, I don't mind giving a little bit, but if you're going to basically take 50% of everything I do, why the heck will I stay here?
Well, and the other issue is I didn't receive any phone calls after the February 29th budget from people who said, oh, Paul Martin's giving me a break, now I'm going to stay. I mean, it was just not enough of a...
If you earn $1 million a year and you have to pay half of that, you're still left with $500,000, which is an awful lot of money.
Right.
People are still complaining it's not enough, they want more.
Well, no, that's not really what they're saying, I want to spend it. Most of my clients, it was a point I mentioned during the break, most of my clients are not that second-generation wealthy people. These are most people who have started out and made all of this money themselves. And they see, many of them will have gone through and seen how vacuous the life is with all the toys, and will have said, I want to spend my money on a certain living standard for me, nothing, whatever it is that makes me happy, the toys don't make me happy. Plus I want to see this money, which I worked hard making, spent to people I think really need that. And I don't feel that this government does that. If I give a dollar to the government, it takes a certain amount of money in order for them to collect it.
Let me challenge you on that. Are we really talking about those sort of people? Are these people who say, you know, I really want to give my money to the poor, but I don't think the government does it efficiently? Surely there are people who are saying, I don't want anyone to have my money.
Well, there are some people like that, but I mean, they're not the norm. I mean, most people do believe in paying some level of taxation.
Michael, most of the clients are, if you've read the book, The Millionaire Next Door. They are not, well, it's an interesting book because it really points out... it really points out that most of the wealth that is made, Bill Gates was not second-generation wealth. That's an extreme example of wealth. But many of these people who, as we drive around in these neighborhoods, we look at these small businesses, these are not wealthy people. They have made money themselves. And they want to. I mean, I know, because part of what I'm doing is actually setting up trusts to devote money to particular charities.
I don't want to appear cynical, but you're really telling me that a lot of these people who want to pay tax in another country or live in another country, they're doing it because they simply want their money to go to different charities than the government's.
Well,
I'm sorry, I just find that hard to believe.
That might be true.
I'm not saying it's not true, I just find it hard to believe.
That might be true. And frankly, I would not be the person who necessarily would be giving everything away. Although the so-called robber barons, otherwise known as the industrious people of the 1800s, gave away, for example, Carnegie gave away $300 million before he died, out of $400 million that he'd even earned. And a lot of what people do when they become wealthy is not, you know, let's buy a big mansion, but rather let's reinvest in yet another business, which is going to employ more people. And maybe they're doing it for egoistic reasons. Maybe they want to be important industrialists. But the point is, by producing, everyone is benefiting.
I agree, but the guys who go and live in the Bahamas aren't doing that, are they?
No, well, some of these people are very much, they realize that when they die, they're not going to be able to spend it either. And they would like to see that money go to the Red Cross, Special Olympics, all kinds of different charitable organizations. Yeah. And, I mean, that's really one of the key points. And it was really an eye-opener for me. I came in very much with the same attitude, and it was just seeing client after client. And these are real people, and they just have this extraordinary idea that it was their money, they made it, and whether they want to spend it on something frivolous, which most of them don't, or something else, it's their choice, not somebody else who
if I'm judging them, I suppose I am judging them, but if I'm misjudging them, I apologize. I mean, I have to say my initial reaction...
Well, I'm not one of them yet, so...
No, but I mean, I'm
in the top tax bracket. I mean, I am actually.
Really?
Yes, I am. Not based upon my own income, but based upon other things that I have. I pay an enormous amount of tax. I've been paying tax since I was born.
Where do you get this money from, Michael?
Well, that's neither here nor there, but it's legal. It's mostly within my family. But, you know, capitalism needs motivation to survive. And people, when they see their tax money being taken away from them on a regular basis, what else are they going to do? Obviously, they're going to look for other means. Hopefully, most take the issue of tax avoidance, which is legal rather than tax evasion, but they're still going to look for other avenues to put their money away. I can't blame them.
But Mike, you're lucky, and good for you that your family, your dad has been successful, and there's money in the family.
Right.
My dad worked very, very hard driving a cab, you know, 30, 40 years of his life.
Right.
There's nothing for me. There's not a penny there.
Sure.
It's not that I'm resentful, although maybe I am. What I'm saying is you can work incredibly hard. Two people can work incredibly hard, but one has nothing to show, the other one has everything to show.
Right. But the theory of capitalism is that people will be able to obtain that level. Some do, some don't. It does happen sometimes.
It's a nice theory, isn't it?
Well,
416-203, 0302-905-3332-3131. We'll get to Jack and Eileen and Peter and Bob and the rest of you when we come back on Michael Coren Live on CDS. Don't go away.
It's a high five.
Welcome back to you, Michael Coren Live, CDS. We're talking about taxation. The panel, once again, David Lesperance here, a lawyer, a global relocation consultant, Paul McKeever, another lawyer, goodness me, and a member of the Ontario Freedom Party, and Michael Taube, who's a public affairs analyst. You're not a lawyer too, are you?
No, law family, but not a lawyer.
Let's take some calls. Jack is on line 5. Hi there, Jack.
Hi,
Hi.
Michael. First, I'd like to say that I agree with your point about morality of paying income tax. But secondly, when I heard the two person that you had at first talk, I had the impression I was listening to politicians, because they seem to actually deal with any problem that they have in the same manner, and they don't really answer in a moral way. And I'm not religious, so I'm not talking about religion. Okay. Secondly, though, when I heard all the people that you have around the table now talk, my impression was, in one way, what came out of it, the people that are trying to get out of Canada are going to go to a country that are not that much better at accounting for their income tax, and the people that work for them.
Well, no. I mean, the whole point of leaving this system is to move to a system and on a basis which is a better deal, and that's why you hire a team of lawyers and accountants to figure out what that better deal is, and that better deal. I mean, the classic conundrum is I'll have a client who will call right after they've been audited, and they said, well, I want to move somewhere where I don't pay any taxes. And my standard stock answer is, we'll move you to a little island in the middle of the South Pacific. You won't pay any taxes. We'll leave you with a gun. You'll want to kill yourself in 6 months, but you won't pay any taxes. Now let's start talking about your lifestyle, because generally these people come with families who must be entertained and educated and must have medical services and all of those things. And so people will really look around, and many countries, including the United Kingdom, Canada in certain ways, the United States, Ireland, along with Bermuda and the Cayman, will cut a better deal for these people than they will for their native stock, because they believe that the native stock, because of life inertia, they have too many ties, won't leave, so that they will try to milk those golden geese a little more.
Do we do that for them? For example, if a Brit or an American wants to come to Canada, do we give them tax breaks to get them here?
Good question. And if they have not been living here before, if they do some pre-immigration tax planning, they can put those assets into a structure prior to arriving in Canada, and we will give them a 5-year complete tax holiday on the income and capital gain. Now, those people do need money to live. They will bring monies in. The nature of the beast is that they are entrepreneurs. Generally, after I get somebody who's moved here, it takes about a year. They give me a call. They said, I've met somebody somewhere who said they make widgets for $5. I know how to do it for $4. And they end up having Canadian source income. I can think of one client within the 2 years that he's been in British Columbia, he's created 40 jobs. And this was a fellow who swore to me that he was tired of running a business, and he's just going to come to Canada and golf and ski. And that's the nature of the person.
Let's try and squeeze one more. Eileen on line 8. Hello, Eileen.
Hi, Michael.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
I agree with not the last caller, the one before that. I think that we actually do pay too much tax. I mean, we're taxed on everything. And I think it's all right for people that have a decent job and they're getting a steady wage every month or every week. My husband is a bricklayer, and I mean, in the wintertime, they're slogging their guts out to try and get 5 hours in a day, and they have, they have to pay their taxes too. But like we are 3 months trying to get money in, or actually 9 months trying to get money in to pay for the months that you have none.
I'm sorry, mate, I've got to stop you there, but a great last word, obviously an Ulster woman with all the wisdom we need. Thank you for that last call. David Lesperance, thank you so much for being here, and Paul McKeever, thanks for being here, and Michael Taube, thank you for being here. That was it. I mean, amazing stuff. Tomorrow night we have a cornucopia, and now that was the week that was panel. We'll have a judge, a High Court judge, defending judicial activism. MichaelCoren.com is the website if you want to talk to us. Take care, God bless, goodbye, see you tomorrow.